back, everyone, to the From Crisis to Justice podcast. I'm your host, Parag Amin. I'm joined by a very special guest here today, David A. Perez. He's been quoted or seen on numerous publications such as CBS, Entrepreneur, and Business Insider for his expertise on tax. David is a top tax strategist known for helping high-income earners reduce or eliminate their tax liability by implementing advanced tax strategies so they can use their tax savings to invest in assets like real estate. He's passionate about helping his clients join the elite 3% of taxpayers who make over $200,000 and pay $0 in federal taxes. Welcome, David. Thank you so much for being on today.
Dude, what's up, my man? That was a great intro. I appreciate you having me. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So what brought you and got you into the area that you're in now, David?
To tax, you mean? How did I get there? I didn't grow up like most people would thinking I was going to be a tax guy or I love numbers or an accountant or any of those things. In fact, it was kind of like the opposite. I didn't like math. I didn't really like a lot of things about finance. But in 2006, I got my real estate license. And I was pursuing a career in becoming a very successful realtor. But I mean, everybody gets into it to be a very successful realtor. And I was in my 20s trying to figure out life. And, about a year and a half in, I'm starting to find a groove. And then the market starts to tank. And I, as not a very well-established realtor, and I was still very immature. I didn't have an established client base. I didn't have a very good network. So I didn't really succeed in that endeavor. And so when I was trying to find something else to do with my life, a buddy of mine introduced me into the tax preparation industry. And he introduced it to me as like, hey, an opportunity to have a job and maybe partner with him. But I wasn't relatively excited about it until I kind of put a lot of thought together. And I thought this could be a good business. And it wasn't again, because I like taxes or finance. It was more so because at the time I was experiencing the recession, and taxes seemed to be recession proof. So I said, there's something here. And so I entered into the industry in my first year. I realized that I had a passion for it. And it wasn't a passion for numbers. It was a passion for people. And I loved learning about people's unique situations, how they made money, how they invested money, how they blew their money, and how they paid taxes. And it was very interesting to learn just the structures that were going on around me that I never was exposed to, because I grew up relatively poor. My parents didn't have a lot of money, so I didn't see any of their tax returns. We didn't talk about finance. So this was all new to me. And so in that first year, I made a decision that this was going to be my career. And that was in 2008. And as I pursued that career, I became one of the biggest or largest tax preparers in the state of Texas. We were preparing about 7,000 tax returns on an annual basis. So 7,000 customers. And I really grew that business. I loved it. And, in 2015, I was filing my own personal tax return. And as I was entering everything into the damn software, I call it the damn software because, software never works. And I was putting it in the bottom, and I see on page 2 of the 1040 where it says how much you owe or how much you're going to get in a refund. As I was entering in my documents and stuff and my profit and loss statements and all those things, the number kept on growing. And it finally stopped at $142,000. And so I'm sitting there looking at my software like, what the F, right? A guy who's in the tax industry looking at his own tax return and realizing that I didn't know jack shit about taxes. Like I just realized that in that moment. So I said, oh, what's the best thing I could do? So, next best thing is to find somebody who could help me. So I went over to a mentor of mine who was a very successful CPA. And I went to him and I said, hey, man, I need some help. And I shared with him all of my documents and my tax return. And he came to the same conclusion. And, as I'm there sitting down, I'm like, dude, you're successful. You know what you're doing. Tell me how I can get rid of this bill. And he looks at me and he says, David, there's no way to do that. And I said, why not? And he goes, you failed to plan. And I said, okay, I can agree there, but there's got to be a way. I said, all these very successful billionaires, the Donald Trumps of the world, they seem to find ways. Why can't I find a way? And he says to me, David, that's just not how it is. And you should be so lucky because, you made money. And when you make money, you're supposed to pay your taxes. And as I'm sitting there contemplating this idea, like I'm supposed to, right? I challenge him. I'm like, there's got to be a way. There's something to do here. Like, I know people avoid taxes. You're smart. Help me. And he just looks at me and he says, David, if you don't pay your taxes, you shouldn't have the right to vote. And, this was a guy I looked up to. So, I finally just, I backed down and I said, okay, I will agree here to disagree, but I will agree. And I walked out of that office with my tail between my legs. And, I vowed that day to never let that ever happen to me again. And I said, I'm not going to allow this to be my future. And so over the course of the next 5 years, up until about 2020, I just studied the tax code to find solutions for me, because as a tax professional, there's tax preparers and there's CPAs and there's accountant. There's all these different titles, but just to be clear, the majority of them are just they're data entry people. We're historians, and so I was doing a lot of historian work. I was preparing returns, but I was preparing for people who didn't have a tax problem. They just got either a freaking refund, which always pissed me off because I'm like, they're getting money back, and I paid all that effing money, and or they didn't have a big tax bill, so I couldn't help them. So I was just helping myself. And so 5 years into this journey, I figure out a formula that I can use for myself, investing in different asset classes that give me tax favored benefits, structuring my entities the right way. And, I was doing it for me to win. And in 2020, when the world kind of shifted and everything had to go virtual, my business had to shift because the majority of my clients came into my office and shook my hand. Well, we couldn't do that anymore. And the way I was getting new business was, going out and shaking hands. I was more of a network guy in my community. I was known in the community, by the way, as the tax guy. When I realized I had to pivot, I pivoted to online. I started to market to different people. One of my marketing pieces was I'll help you with your PPP and EIDLs and SBA this and SBA that, which was a big deal at that time. And I started to meet people from all over the country because most of my clients were down here in Texas. And now I was like meeting people in different in Florida and Alabama and California. And anyways, so one guy reaches out to me in March, one of my first clients, and says, hey, I need some help. So I get on a Zoom call with him and he shares with me his information so I could help him with the application. And I'm looking at his tax return and I realized this guy owed 100 grand. And I said, did you owe this consecutively? So I looked at the last 3 years, he'd be paying 100 grand. And I said, you know what, bro, if you don't mind, can I just look at these returns really quickly? And as I started to scope through these returns, I realized that this guy was just severely overpaying. He's paying 50,000 more than he needed to pay. And I didn't even know it at the time. Like this was just something I just knew secondhand. I had figured this out, but I didn't even know it. And so as I'm reviewing it, I'm like, hey, can I help you? And he says, yeah, help me. And then I like, okay, let's do this. Let's do this. And then I said, let's figure this out. And at the end, he's just like, dude, you should just like do this. And I'm like, you're right. Like he's asked me, do you do this every day? I was like, actually, I don't get to do this every day. I said, but what if I could do this every day? And it was like more of like an epiphany. The guy I was looking for in 2015 was the guy I was that day. And I just had built these unique skill sets, not only to save taxes, but I had built, multi-seven-figure tax practice. I had managed hundreds of employees. I've leveraged and borrowed money from institutions. We had multiple real estate at that time. We probably had a $2 or $3 million real estate portfolio. Today, it's over 8 figures. Like I learned a lot of these things because I went through them. And now today, that's all I do is I help high income earners or high achievers like you who are like, screw this. I'm not supporting Ukraine. I'm not supporting the shit they're telling me about. Like, and it's not because I'm trying to get political. It's like, you see where the dollars go. The only people who are supporting those things are the people who don't pay taxes. Because if they did, they would say, screw that. I'm not giving my money to anybody. Like, I worked hard. At least let me pick where it can go, right? Like, let me decide which institution should receive this funds. Because if I'm going to give it away, okay, cool. I'm not against giving tax dollars to the government. I just want to have more control. And if I can make it so it's not so much, then that's my right. And I believe it's our right not to pay taxes.
Listen, I love that. I love that. And I agree with you as it relates to supporting these wars. I think the people supporting them are the ones profiting off of supporting it.
That's right.
So let me ask you this. You said you grew up relatively poor. Now, obviously, you're very successful. You work with very successful entrepreneurs. What was that journey like? Like, what was childhood like for you growing up, being poor? And what was that lifestyle like? And then what has that journey been like for you?
Great question. So I was born 1983, puts me 40 years old. In the 80s, there was an internet technology and all these things. And so I was born to two young parents. My mom was 17 years old when she had me. And at birth, the doctors told my mother that I was going to be a special kid. And he really meant that. And the reason he meant that is because I am Mexican. Both of my parents are Mexican. They're brown and I'm white. So when I was born, they diagnosed me with a condition called albinism, which means I lack pigmentation in my skin, sensitive to light. That's just how I was born. And so the doctor tells my mom at 17, she says, hey, she's going to be a special kid, a special needs kid. And so that was the label. And so my mother raised me for about a year and realized that raising a special needs kid apparently was very hard. And so my grandparents took me under their care and they raised me. I was in special ed classes at the age of 3. I was treated as a special eds or special needs kid all my life. I had a relatively good life. We weren't dirt poor, but we didn't have a lot of money. We never ate out, never took a vacation, didn't get toys, didn't get perks, none of that stuff. Like I can literally tell you that we never took a vacation ever because we couldn't afford it. We never ever ate out because we couldn't afford it, like never. And so my grandparents raised me. I grew up in a great school system that, supported me. I never really saw myself as a special needs kid, but I was, okay. That's what they treated me like. And so I got bullied because of my looks because I was the whitest kid in school. But I got coddled by the teachers and my family, which was cool, right? So it was like this pro and con relationship all my life. And so I grew up until about the age of 16. I come home from school, I was just a regular school day. I come home from school and there's 2 gentlemen sitting in the living room with my parents. And these are my grandparents, but they're my parents. And so they asked me to sit down. They asked me to sit down. I sit down and they asked me a group of questions. And they're just like asking me about my medical history and they're asking me about my conditions. And so I answer all these questions. And then at the end of the questioning, I said, "What's this all about?" And the guy looks over at me and he says, "This is for life insurance." And I said, "Okay, whatever." And, I was kind of shy and timid. I mean, I was trained like that all my life. I mean, I was kind of bullied and picked on. So I was a shy kid. So I go to my bedroom and later that night I run into my mom in the kitchen and I say, "Mom, what's this all about?" And she tells me, "David, we wanted to get a life insurance policy on you because if in the event of something happening to us, because they're my grandparents, they're a little older, we want somebody to have, something to fall back on." She didn't say it in those words, but basically what she was trying to tell me is somebody's going to take care of you and we want to give them this as a gift. And, at that point in my life, I had never felt like I was a burden or dependent or that somebody had to take care of me. I had never felt this way in my life. And in that moment I did. And it was a wake up call for me. And it was kind of like an eye opening experience that made me believe that I was not put on this earth to be a dependent. And so on that moment in time, I made a decision to be an independent person, that I was not going to have a label put on me and that I wasn't going to stay and be this, kid that depended on his parents or the school system or some sort of disability, anything. I didn't want that. And so it was like I was born again. And at 16 years old, I made these changes in my life mentally to become an independent person. Which kind of led me in some negative paths. I mean, like you hang out the wrong people who do the wrong things, but it was me trying to find myself. My career really didn't begin till about, maybe, I went to college for a year and I failed everything. And then I went to another college and I pursued my degree, but along the way, I was just trying my best to figure things out. That's when I got my license to be a real estate agent. Becoming a real estate agent was one of the most exciting things for me because it was really independence, because I believe independence is really business ownership. It's entrepreneurialism at some level. And so I became an independent contractor, which was exciting. And then to have that shattered in a year and a half kind of sucked. But one thing I picked up, and this is kind of like the second epiphany in my life, is when I was doing all the networking for real estate. I was always shy and a timid guy. Like I was the guy that would just kind of walk into a room and go sit by himself. I tried to network, but I was more networking with people I knew, not people I didn't know. I was just that guy. And so one event, I'm going to this network event for real estate agents. And I walked in and I had done a bunch of these events in the past, but I just went to this one. And I walked in, and as soon as I walked in, like everybody was like, "Hey, David, hey, David, hey, David." And I was just like, "Oh, I mean, everybody knows me here. This is weird," but I couldn't remember them. That's the weird part. Like I couldn't remember them, but they remembered me. And so like later in the afternoon or later in that party, I'm having a few drinks with people and people just kept on always coming by. "David, how you doing? David, David, David." And later that night I go home and I'm like, man, I didn't know half of those fucking people. Like, how did they know me? And, it dawned on me in that moment that the reason they knew me is because I looked different. And you can't forget me is kind of what I thought. I was like, they couldn't forget me. And, the one thing that I was always shy and timid about is my looks, my appearance. Like I really was. because I look different compared to all the people that I grew up around. In that moment, I realized the thing that was really the most different about me was the one thing that I had a competitive advantage on. Because in the marketplace, the thing is to look different. The thing is to be different, because you got to pay to do that, right? You got to be louder, you got to be crazier, you got to stand out somehow, because your competition is going to look the same if you look the same, right? You can't compete against somebody that you just can't look like, right? So I used this as my competitive advantage. Like I embraced it. And I said, you know what? The appearance that I didn't like, this is who I am. And, fuck it. You're going to remember me forever. Even if you're just going to remember my ass. And so it was another epiphany for me. And, my journey is kind of taken off from there. I wrote a few books about like just this concept of going and building something that's independent of yourself, called Building Your Own Economy. I've opened to several companies, from real estate to tax. We got a mortgage company. We've done several things, but I'm really passionate about sharing where I've been. That's important, because I have had a lot of epiphanies along the way. But what I'm more passionate about is helping people get to another level. And that starts with the foundation of finance, because as much as we want to talk about everything else other than health, it's the most primary thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that story. I love everything about that, the resilience, the difficulty I'm sure you faced of being underestimated and making the decision to use what other perceived as a weakness and turn it into your superpower.
That's right, man.
That's incredible.
Underdog.
So let me ask you this. I mean, obviously you were faced with adversity at a very young age because of just the way you look, and other people look differently than you. And so you're bullied and you go through that. Now, I'm sure that the challenges didn't stop there, meaning you decide to start your own business. You're involved in advising clients on taxes. You've also got your own real estate company and business, and I'm sure you've taken some knocks along the way, maybe some legal knocks too. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how you found your way through that?
I got into business for myself as a real estate agent, but my second business, which I rarely talk about, was a bar. Okay. And I got into the bar business because what I learned as a realtor, and in that process of like kind of spreading my wings and becoming independent, is you have to have a network and you got to know the right people. Like I figured that out at an early age. Now, I didn't always know like the best people, but I knew that if I was going to go to a place, I wanted to meet the owner. I wanted to meet the manager. I wanted to connect with the right people. Like I've always known that's a big deal. My dad, which is my grandfather, who's passed away, but he was in his early career, he was more of a banker, and it wasn't like a banker, like more like these small finance companies. So it wasn't like a big role, but he ran little finance companies. Didn't make a lot of money, but I always would, if I ever saw him, he knew so many people, and he'd always shake their hand. He goes, "Oh, that guy's the manager here," and this guy, like he would tell me these things as a young kid. So when I grew up, I kind of felt like that is like something you should do, and so anytime I'd meet people, I'd introduce myself. And if I knew they were the owner, I'd always make it a point to like try to connect. And so I connected with the owner of a local bar. We became really good friends right when I was a real estate agent. I'd go there and I liked to drink. I was in my 20s. So, I mean, that was cool. And so I'd hang out with him. And then one night, after, actually, I'll tell you this story just so everybody can get this. I would always go every night. Like I was a local there. And at the end of the night, which was like 2 a.m. or 12, whatever time we would close, I would actually help this guy clean up and stuff. Like he was a manager, owner, janitor, everything. And I just, that's who I was. I would just help. So I'd throw out the trash every night with him, and I'd sweep up, and I'd do cool stuff. And so one night we were sitting there after hours just having a beer, and he's like, "Hey man, I need to get out of this business." And I said, "Okay, well, why? I love this place. Like, it seems like you're making money. Do I need to like spend more money? Do we need to promote?" And he's like, "No, man, I'm just having some challenges with my wife and some other things, and I need to sell." And I said, "Do you have a buyer?" I didn't know a lot. And he's like, "No." And he's like, "How about you buy it?" And I was like, "I'm here on the dollar beer nights, bro." Like, like I don't make fucking money is basically what I was telling him. And he's just like, "Nah, man, like you're a good guy, and like you helped me, and I know you wouldn't let this place down." He's like, I'd be willing to finance this for you." And I said, "Yeah, but I still don't have money." He goes, "Look, this is what I'll do." And it took like 2 or 3 days. And he came to me. He says, "Look, I'll leave you the money in the till that night, whatever. I'm going to give you the night. I'm going to transition this business to you. I'm going to let you make as much money as you can. Promote the shit out of it. Make a bunch of money, because that's going to be your starting fund." That's how he started me. He let me sell and he gave me the product. And he gave me a kind of a payment plan to give him money back. And that's what we did. Now, the reason I'm sharing this story is not because I want to talk about the bar, but it was a crazy, amazing, exciting, overwhelming, stressful, inebriated experience. About a year into that experience, I'm in the bar during the day on like a weekday. I'm cleaning, and a lady comes in and she says, "Are you David Pettis?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she goes, "Here you go." And she served me with papers. Here we go. First legal experience of my life. Serves me with papers, and that I was being sued because one night a guy at the bar decides to get his ass kicked. And it wasn't even in the bar. He gets his ass kicked by the road, which is literally 100 yards away. And he gets his ass kicked and apparently, like, he was in the bar. He leaves the bar talking shit to everybody. Some guys follow him, take him into the parking lot, and whoop his ass. Well, I get served with a lawsuit for a guy who gets his ass kicked. Anyway, so I've never done this before, so I don't respond. I'm like, fuck these guys. And I had never done this, so I was immature. So, another letter comes and then I get served again. And it's finally like, oh shit, this is serious. Now, fortunate for me, I had insurance. So I filed a claim with my insurance. I had liquor liabilities, which you required in the state of Texas. Liquor liability takes in place. And then I go through these formal proceedings of depositions and discoveries and all that. It was crazy. Now, what I learned along the way, I learned very young that, anybody can file a fucking lawsuit. That was stupid. Number two, lawyers will charge any amount of money to make money. Sorry, bro. I learned that the legal system is designed to settle and not to be right. Right? It's just designed to settle. It's never designed to actually win, because it's never favorable if anybody can win, because the only person that wins in a lawsuit, everybody knows this, is the attorneys. That's the only people that really win, because the fees go to the attorneys no matter what, and no matter who, somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. And even if they win, the attorney gets paid. And even if they lose, the attorney gets paid. So good luck, And I learned a lot about lawsuits in this experience. It took about 3 years to settle that suit, by the way, of back and forth depositions, back and forth interviews. I actually met the guy face to face. I was like, bro, I've never seen you. I don't know you. You weren't even on my property. His claim was that we didn't have adequate security at the door, which was about 100 yards away. It was so dumb, man. We ended up settling with the guy. Well, I didn't pay anything. I just paid my insurance policy, but I think he got 80 grand, of which I have no clue how much he actually kept, right? Because the lawyer probably got a good percentage of that. But I had to go to 3 years of court hearings for no reason. And of course, I've been in a lot of things, the state of Texas for, the city I was in. I got cited and fined for signs a few times that I had to go to court. I had a warrant for my arrest. I was on the media and the news because these guys were trying to shut down I've been in all kinds of crazy stuff, bro, because I'm very loud and aggressive in business. And well, that's what it is. Now, fortunate for me, by the way, everybody who's watching this, fortunate for me, I've never been in a negative situation with the IRS. I've never been in an audit with the IRS that didn't get settled and was favorable for us. I've never been in a situation where we've had criminal or any proceedings brought upon me, because everything has just been civil from, litigation standpoint. I've never really been in really big lawsuits other than that.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay. Well, I didn't want to interrupt the flow there, but I got to disagree with some of the stuff you said, as you probably
Sure
expected
you
me
do.
to. Yeah. I
I'm
mean, look, listen, my clients win, but I will say this. I understand that. I will say that I understand that perspective of lawyers. A lot of people tend to have that negative view and stereotype of lawyers because, at the end of the day, I think great lawyers looking out for their clients and what's in the client's best interest. And so, for example, the way we litigate cases at my firm is we look at the ROI, the return on investment that a client's going to get in terms of what they've paid in legal fees versus what they're actually going to recover. So we're looking at cases where it's like 2x, 4x, 10x, 20x what their attorney's fees were. So, not literally
if
every
they
case
win.
works out that way, but what's that?
If they win. If they
If
win.
they
right?
win. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, or, to your point, most cases do settle. At some point, they do settle. And
I,
at what
by the
point
way, you're not. I don't actually believe that all lawyers this way. I would just say that it's probably skewed. If I had to guess, it's probably 80-20. 20% of the lawyers are out there like you who care and present a really nice proposal and say, hey, this is the return on investment. This is what we're trying to do. Like, it's probably go through a whole really good process. I think 80% of them are not this way. That's just my belief system. Am I, what would you say?
Well, listen, I don't know about the stats on this, but I will say this. I think here's the common thread between both of us is you started your business as a solution for yourself. Yes? Like
Yep.
you were the solution you were looking for. So you wanted to
Correct.
provide that service. So just a brief background about me. The reason I went into law in the first place is when I was a kid, my parents had immigrated to the United States from India, and my dad wanted to be an entrepreneur. He wanted to be an investor, and he had invested his life savings in this store in Florida. So he moved my family from New York, where I was born, down to Florida. And he and my mom are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week trying to make this store successful, trying to get a piece of the American dream. 2 years after he bought the store, the taxing authority comes knocking. And they're like, listen, you owe over $200,000 in unpaid sales taxes. And he's like, that doesn't make sense. We've paid our sales taxes. Here's what he didn't know. The guy before him hadn't paid his sales taxes, and my dad had bought the entity, the company that owned the store. So he had also bought the liabilities. And so the taxing authority doesn't care about any of that. Their position is, look, pay us or shut it down. So my dad had to make the tough decision of shutting it down. So I decided at a relatively young age, I didn't want that to happen to me or my family again. And I didn't want that to happen to other people. So I started the firm with that idea, that solution that I was looking for, that I hope my dad had back when he got taken advantage of. So I don't want that to happen to other business owners.
Is that so? What's your primary litigation? You're in litigation. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's right.
Civil?
Business disputes, partnership disputes, litigation. Although we
Okay.
do deal with pre-litigation disputes, meaning before the lawsuit is filed, it does come in, but it's a rarer breed. Usually people come to us once the lawsuit's already been filed.
Hey man, proactive or reactive? Everybody's reactive, right? That's
Yeah.
but by the way, what you're saying is a very good testament to the degree of which we always pursue the things that we want to solve problems for. And I thoroughly agree with you that taking from, and the reason I use the stat is because I've encountered a lot of attorneys over the course of my career. I mean, I have an attorney right now, which I just feel like just bills me all the time. Do I feel like there's value behind it? 100%. Like, but I just hate seeing bills all the time. I just hate it. Right. It's, I think attorneys do get a bad rap just because there are a lot of bad ones. That's what I mean. And I don't mean that to disrespect you or your profession. I just feel like there's probably a lot more people out there that are just about money than they are about winning or success for their clients. And it sounds like you're doing a great job.
Yeah,
Really.
I appreciate that. I mean, because I think you and I both measure our success with like the success of our respective clients. At a certain point, there's only so much money you can use, and it really has to be about something more than the financials of it. It really ends up being like the success of your clients, and if you're doing a great job for them. At least that's been really my metric.
That's exactly right. In the legal world, what I've encountered in partnerships and relationships and things is that along the way, proactive is better than reactive, and very few people are proactive in this sense. Most partnerships, are started without really good operating agreements. I mean, maybe not even an operating agreement at these days, right? I think a lot of people are pursuing their self-service tools, like in our tax industry. And in 2015 was a big shift because there was this big push for like online filing with different providers. I'm pretty confident in legal firms. That was the what's the big legal firm online or law firm?
LegalZoom.
Yeah. When LegalZoom started, I'm sure every attorney in the country was like, screw this is stupid. And only because self-service gets you what you paid for, right? And a lot of people don't see the value in those things. Like, I believe attorneys need to be there for those type of legal documents. I believe attorneys have a great role for business owners across this country. And the things that we do from a tax perspective all are maybe don't require an attorney, a full blown out like attorney, but they do require legal structures that need to be reviewed or audited or presented through an attorney. All of our clients are recommended to have an attorney on counsel. I believe there's a board of advisors that everybody needs. You definitely need a pastor. You definitely need a partner. You definitely need an attorney. You need a financial advisor. You definitely need a doctor on there, right? And you need a tax strategist. You need those people in your corner. And if you don't have those people, that's kind of like your board of advisors. And if you got those people, which a great attorney is part of that, you've got a great team that could get you through anything.
Yeah, that's great advice. So what are your thoughts on this, David? How do you or your clients get all of those advisors on the same page? Do you recommend that the listeners hire each one of these experts? And then is there like a group meeting? How do you make sure that your clients are on the same page or their advisors are on the same page as you are?
Well, I don't necessarily believe you need to have some formal board meeting, although that can happen. I think you got to pay all of them. Number one, that's for sure. You never, as much as I'd like to say that, like for an example, my doctor, for an example, I believe that's a foundational piece. By the way, nobody will include that in a board of advisors. I need a doctor, right? Like my doctor, he makes over 5 figures for me every year. Okay, and that's not insurance, that's pay. And because I don't really necessarily I don't need insurance. I mean, we do have some insurance, but you get what I mean? Like, I don't want to pay him through an insurance. I want him to know that I'm committed to him. So whenever I make the phone call at 2 a.m, 2 p.m, or 7 a.m, he's going to answer that call. But what I'm trying to say is like, that guy doesn't necessarily need to engage with my banker, doesn't need to necessarily engage with my attorney. So when I find people, I want to engage with them on a personal level. And I want to say, you're my advisor in this specific area. And from time to time, I may communicate that you need to engage with this other person. Like my attorney definitely probably needs to talk to my banker, needs to make sure that my tax team knows what's going on. Those three people probably have more synergy than anything. But I don't think they need to meet. I really think it just depends. Like whenever I have a challenge in my life, I just ask myself, who on my team do I need to talk to? That's all I do.
And how have you found your team? Is it referrals from other people? Is it how do you vet who you're going to let onto your team? Because I think that's a critical question to figure out.
Maybe I'm a little more fortunate than most in the sense that I've just stumbled along the way. I didn't have a strategic approach to it. Today, if I had to go back, I would just be looking for people who align with my core values, right? Personal development, growth, details matter, winning it all, winning is an important. So I look around me and I find the people that I want to have what they're doing or want to be aligned with where they're going. I don't like for an example, I was working with one of my team members this morning and he was talking to me about his physician and how he listens to his physician at all costs. And, and this team member is not in great health. And I said, why do you listen to your doctor? And he says, well, because my doctor, that's their job. They're supposed to take care of me. And I said, no, you look at your doctor and you say, is this person healthy? Is this person an example of, what I want to embody? And he's like, so I look at them and ask them. I said, you don't have to ask them, just look at them. And if they don't have that appeal and you can't say that you want to be like them, then that's not the right person. The same thing from a banker's perspective. If I was talking to a banker, I would be looking at, okay, I have big aspirations, right? Like I want to own, $100 million worth of real estate in the next 24 months. Okay. So how do I get there? I'm going to need a good banker who has the lending capacity to do that. So I have to know that their bank that they work with can produce or connect me with that kind of lending capacity. And if they can't, then that's not the right guy. I have to know that my attorney is well versed in ways of business, right? Like they have to have a business acumen. If they don't have a business acumen, like you, for an example, you'd be a great illustration of somebody to work with. Like if I were starting my business right now, I'd be talking to you. I'd be like, let's talk proactively. Let's make sure, like I'm thinking about having partners. What are your thoughts on that partnership? How should I be thinking about this? What are the structures? If I want to go to, like right now, I'm opening a new business. Well, I've opened the business. We're converting it to a C Corp and we're putting some things together. And I started consulting with people with not profit sharing agreements, with stock option agreements. And we're bringing people in that have these skill sets. And if I find one of the attorneys that are just so good, I'm like, hey, I need you on my team because I got to be proactive. If I'm looking at my faith, then obviously you go to the church that you like. If my partner is my wife, right? Like I chose that partner. So we're trying to find people that have core values that are in alignment with me, that have positions that can benefit me. And that I think based on where I want to go, they have the characteristics, attributes, and resources to get me there.
Yeah. I love that. And I agree with that. That's something I tell my clients too, is, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to core values, alignment, making sure you feel comfortable with the person and they share similar values as you do. And then two, comes down to results. What kind of results has the person you're looking at gotten? Have they gotten results for the type of situation you're in? And if so, what? If they can't give you the stats, I don't know how you can trust them because they're just figuring it out along the way.
That's correct. Usually the way the journey works in most professions is it's go to school, get a job, or open a business, and then with no proven track record of results, most people are teaching things they've never done before.
Yeah,
and most people have never proven a result. So today it's more about where has the person been. Right.
100%.
Because that's the results that you're talking about. Where's the person been? What have they gone through? What have they had to, what have they shown as a demonstrated capacity to produce an outcome? The demonstrated capacity is what you're looking for. Exactly.
100%. Yeah. Outcomes in the real world, as opposed to the safe sandbox of school where somebody's been a lifelong professor and hasn't done any of the stuff they're preaching about.
Yeah, it's so funny is that yesterday or Monday, I reached out to the local university here, University of Texas, and I said, "Hey, I'm looking for some guys. I need some good accountants because we've been growing and I need to hire some junior accountants." Guy writes me back and says, there's a career services department I'm going to connect you with, and I'm like, okay. So I write back, I just want to know who you would pick. like tell me who the winners are, bro. This just made me think of this because I need somebody who's shown a demonstrated capacity to produce a result, and that, but you're not telling me. That's so stupid. Go to the career department and talk to them. I was so mad. I wanted to write back fuck off, you idiot. That's so annoying because that's what we're looking for as entrepreneurs, business owners, or people we want to grow. We're looking for people who have shown a result. Either they're going to show the result to work with us as partners or as team members or as associates. We just got to find those people. And it's harder and harder these days because people, they don't understand that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, so who was the person you reached out to, by the way, at the university who told you to go to the career services? Was it a professor?
It was the dean of accountancy or whatever at the university.
Here's a random thought. If you look on the website, if you find the accounting professors, if you reach out to them and say, hey, who do you think is one of the most proficient students in your class who would be successful at accounting in the real world? That person's got the reality of the day-to-day of the students, right? The dean isn't really as involved with the students.
Well, maybe it wasn't dean. This person was listed as one of the professors too. So wrote an email. I wrote 13 emails. It was 13 of professors. Only one responded.
Wow.
Only one responded. And I said that. I said, I'm a local employer. I'm looking for talented people. I'm growing my company really fast. We have a great opportunity. I was just hoping maybe you could introduce me to a few of them that you feel like may have a potential to do something big. And crickets. I'm like, dude, these guys suck.
Yeah, there's a lot left to desire. I remember career services when I was a law student looking for a summer job. They weren't great at it. And when I was an employer looking for attorneys and looking for law students, I email them and say, hey, who are your best and brightest? Send them over. And they put me through this whole process and they never even got back to me. I'm like, how's this make sense for anybody?
It's the check the box mentality, bro. That is what's happening in most organizations and most bureaucratic organizations where they have to create a system to follow, and no matter what, you can't deviate, because if you deviate, then your metrics are messed up or your funding will get cut. It's so dumb.
It's crazy.
Results are results. In the real world, it's revenue, and they don't have an impact of revenue, so there's no reason, right? When there is no consequence, behavior rarely changes.
Yeah, 100% agree. A game without points, pointless.
That's really good, right? That's a good statement. I never heard that. I like that.
I came up with that. So let me ask you this.
Hey, I'm going to quote you. That was
okay. Listen. Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, let me ask you this. What is the best piece of advice you have ever gotten, and who gave it to you?
It's funny because it's going to go back to my 2015. After I got that big tax bill, I was going through some restructuring because that tax bill put me in a big negative, and I had some debt service that needed to pay off that year. So it was it was all things coming to a head. And the guy that I went to that told me I needed to pay my fucking taxes or don't vote, he was a mentor of mine for real. And so after I left the office that day, and a few weeks later, I called him up and I was like, hey, bro, I just want to talk to you about some things because I got this debt service coming up. I've got to pay this tax bill. I still got a business that I got to run. I don't even know how I'm going to make it. And he says, let's look over your financials. And so, even though I was in the tax world, that doesn't mean I was a bookkeeper or an accountant. I did have our stuff, but it wasn't really as organized as it needed to be. And it wasn't up to date as it needed to be. And so I remember showing him everything. And he goes, look, man, this is his words to me. He goes, the reason you're experiencing all this stuff is because you're not keeping up with the things that you're doing. And then he just said this in this statement. I don't think he'll ever remember this, but he was a very stern guy with me. And he said, David, always know your fucking numbers. He just straight up just told me, and he's like, that's it. He goes, there's no other way to fucking tell you how to change your life. Know your fucking numbers. And I was like, this guy's right. He was right. And that was the best piece of advice I ever had. It's not because I didn't know it. It wasn't because I didn't think that was important. It's because I needed somebody to remind me that is the most important thing. In a business, the financial health is more important than culture, because you can have a great culture but have no fucking money. So, the jelly beans muffins and the Red Bulls and the Kit Kats and all the damn junk food you can put in the break room do not make a business successful. It's what get deposited in the bank account and what's left at the end of the month. And so it was just great advice, and I've always lived to it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, the stats are critical in terms of various areas. That which gets measured is what leads to success.
That's right. You can't measure things like culture. As much as I have a great culture and organization, you can't measure it. You can feel it, but you can't measure it. So you got to measure things.
Yeah. Love that. So let me ask you this, David. Where can our listeners find you to keep track of you? You're on Instagram. Can you tell us about the handle? Where on LinkedIn are you? And what's your website?
So you can find I have a few sites, but if you want to find out if we're a good fit to work together, if I could help you mitigate or eliminate your tax liability, you can go to taxplanexperts.com and schedule a free discovery call. Taxplanexperts.com. We schedule a free discovery call. I give a lot, I would say tons, but I do put out a lot of content pretty regularly, and you can find me on any social channel at I am David A. Don't forget the A, because there's a lot of David Perez's. So David A. Perez. I am David A. Perez on any social channel. You can find me. I do put out regular content about tax strategies, tax savings, and real estate investing, because as a tax strategy, it's what I like to do. Anybody who would need some help from us, go to our website or message me, DM me on any social channel. I'll respond back to you. We'll connect, and hopefully we can find a way to work together.
Love it. That's great. Yeah, guys, chat with David to see if you can save on some taxes for sure. You'll probably be able to find a better way to spend your money than the government will.
Yeah,
so,
man,
David,
invest in some real estate.
Yeah, that's right. All right, David. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us again today, and looking forward to speaking again.
I appreciate you, my man.
Likewise.